Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. My name is Graham Elwood. It's always great to have one of my favorite investigative journalists on the show, Whitney Webb. Whitney, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
It's great having you where the world is in utter chaos, but other than that, things are okay.
Right.
It's
That's like how I always answered that question these days. I'm like, well, considering the circumstances of, complete doom everywhere, things are great.
I know because I don't want to be caught in like everything just being super negative, but I also don't want to be like delusional, like things are great,
Yeah.
just wonderful. Like I don't want to live in like la la land. Um, so such is the state of the world. So there's two things I wanted to talk to you about. First of all, you just had an article, and I want to bring it up here. Um, this is on unlimitedhangout.com, and you have this article, and it'll be in the show notes for everybody's watching later. Charity accused of sex abuse coordinating ID 2020's pilot program for refugee newborns. A biometric identification program backed by ID 2020 Alliance will see its new digital ID program rolled out for refugee newborns in close coordination with a charity tied to Wall Street and prominent Western politicians whose workers have been accused of sexually exploiting refugee children. Okay, so the horrifying ruling class is up to some evil shit again. So can you unpack this for us?
This charity, by the way, is basically the ruling class. It's called the International Rescue Committee. Its president is David Miliband, who used to be the UK's foreign secretary. He's the protege of Tony Blair. He's super close to the Clinton family. Hillary Clinton, if she had won the 2016 election, was going to give him a top post at the State Department. Talked about how she had a big crush on David Miliband and that he's tall and dashing. And they had like this weird back and forth. Like he said she has a fantastic smile. Their pictures of them together are really weird. Anyway, they like to hang out. And that's just the president, right? The co-chairs of the board is the executive vice president of Pfizer. And the other one is Timothy Geithner, who is Obama's secretary of the Treasury during the bailouts. Then they're advised by Henry Kissinger, Madeleine Albright, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, the heads of pretty much every massive major Wall Street bank. And, that's apparently, who really cares about refugee children are those guys.
You definitely want Madeleine Albright, who said that ultimately it was worth it for 500,000 Iraqi children to die. That's who you want in front of
advising a charity that gets close to kids. Right.
Yeah, that's why the person I want in charge of food safety is going to be Jeffrey Dahmer. I just feel like that'll keep us all safe. Like this is
like Henry Kissinger too is the guy who said, especially in light of this program that this article is focusing on, is the guy that created the policy of using food as a weapon to force populations abroad to be more subservient to U.S. designs, and also as a way to reduce the population of third world countries. So he's advising this charity.
Wow.
That's been U.S. policy since the 70s, by the way. It's the Kissinger National Security Directive.
Right.
Something like that. It has a official name,
right?
For the Kissinger Doctrine, whatever.
Yeah, the murder.
I can't believe he's still alive. I hope he goes away soon.
It's unreal. Like, why can any of these older warmongers get COVID-19? Like, it's just perplexing to me. I wish they would all just go to some outdoor event in Florida or something. So to explain to everybody, because I was reading the article before I went live today, and about what how this organization is working and why this is, and we've talked about this a lot in terms of we in uncovering the Epstein stuff. Is Ghislaine Maxwell had this non-for-profit that was kids helping oceans, and obviously they're used for all these horrific, nefarious reasons. We've heard people from Haiti talk about how the Clinton Foundation came in and kids disappeared. So how are you seeing, in light of all that you've studied, with relation to what, because it's pretty complicated in terms of what this organization is doing?
Well, really quick. So talking about like people like Ghislaine Maxwell, right? A lot of people like that, and Leslie Wexner, and just other general criminals that are really rich. They hide behind philanthropy as a way to do either social engineering or execute other things that they want to see happen. And actually, Ghislaine Maxwell in the 1980s was a major fundraiser for Save the Children, right? And Save the Children is one of the NGOs, along with this International Rescue Committee I was just talking about, that was caught, its workers were caught sexually abusing refugees, forcing them into sex for food situations where a family wasn't allowed to eat or wasn't given food from the charity unless they let one of the workers exploit one of their children sexually, right? So, I mean, that's the type of stuff, Save the Children, Oxfam, International Rescue Committee. I mean, it was a list of like 40 charities in the world that largely serve in areas, war-torn areas or conflict zones, or, otherwise vulnerable populations, refugee camps, right? That were caught in engaging in these types of behavior. No one was ever fired. And, well, I think they fired a couple of people, but no one was prosecuted. That's what I mean. So no one ever was held accountable, basically. And they shoved it under the rug. And the International Rescue Committee used to get money from the UK government, and what their workers were doing was so bad that the UK government actually defunded them, stopped giving them money. So, and you have to be pretty bad for them to stop giving money to someone that's advised by Wall Street and Kissinger and led by David Miliband, who used to be a big guy in the Labor Party, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're really seeing how this ruling class global sex trafficking ring works. I mean, this is what they do. They get obviously very powerful people, and then they set up these NGOs to go into war-torn or areas.
Well, these people, right, are predators, essentially. People like Kissinger, Albright, Wall Street. Right. So, I mean, they essentially see these vulnerable populations as easy prey, and they test out things on these people that they want to see implemented elsewhere. And so this ID 2020 program that they're implementing in these refugee camps right now, they openly say that that's something they want to take to developed countries and essentially everywhere. And basically what it is it's, you have to participate in this iris scanning biometric ID program if you want to be able to access any of the services, offered in these camps by these NGOs, like access to food or water, right? And obviously these people in these refugee camps are not being given informed consent. It's being run by predatory charities. International Rescue Committee is one. The other one is called iRespond, that's teamed up with Microsoft. Its president and chairman of the board used to work as the head of human informatics for DARPA, the U.S. military, which of course has a very sordid history of labor trafficking and sex trafficking, at least through contractors like DynCorp and a bunch of other ones, right? And so he runs something called Infinitum Humanitarian Systems that contracts out to Booz Allen Hamilton, the intelligence community, has partnerships with Google, in Silicon Valley and all this stuff. And he's the guy basically, behind this company that's, using this biometric ID technology, and basically the only way you can access these services is getting your iris scan. So and also if they have cash benefits or cash assistance to refugees, the only way they can access that money, because it's tied together with this biometric system, is if they participate in that system, right? So it's basically asking them to choose between not eating and participating in this program, right? Which is honestly really sick, but they of course justify it as they say they're helping them, right? But I mean, it doesn't really look that way, I mean, they often, disguise it however they want. They put the PR spin on it, but they openly say that they're testing out there to, expand it globally at some point.
Right. They're eventually going to test it on us. I mean, you and I talked about this several months ago when, in the first month or so of the shutdown from the pandemic, about, Bill Gates's organization talking about, he's going to come in with this vaccine and it's going to have a way to do contract tracing. And we, you broke down Gates's history and ties to Epstein that go way farther back than he even admits.
Right.
And he's talked about...
he's a major backer of ID 2020, right? And what this biometric ID system does, it links this food benefit things, this money, it's like a digital wallet. It links it to your identity. It also links it to vaccine records. And if you are signed up to be a test subject in a clinical trial for big pharma, which is apparently also happening in some of these places where this is going on. Makes sense when you consider that the International Rescue Committee, its co-chair, as I mentioned, is the executive vice president of Pfizer.
Oh, weird that they just God, these people are so evil, man. They literally just we'll test all of our products on poor people that are refugees.
They're vulnerable. Yeah. I mean, who are they going to go and try and tell? I mean, they're like a lot of these places where they're doing it, they're stateless. They're like really vulnerable. They, have lived in these camps for decades in the Myanmar-Thailand border. So, I mean, they're like a captive population. There's also a similar program that was piloted with Syrian refugees in Jordan, where if they want to eat, they have to scan their irises to check out with the food. And that's the only way they can get sort of like benefits from any of these quote unquote charities operating there.
And of course, it always just comes back to the fact that these people with all this money and power could actually fix all of these problems, but they need this chaos, they need this sanctioning, they need this war so they can have this test group. That's what's just so disgusting. All of these people could just end war. They could end poverty, they could end refugee, they could just end it and make the world a better place, but they're so... it's pure evil. I don't their brains must have a tumor in them or something that is just what makes you think, oh, hey, rather than how do we fix the world's, we always talk, we need to end hunger. Well, you assholes could end it. You want to keep it going so you can steal people's bio data, their data, biometric data so that you can test it. They're out of their minds. It's just, I don't know, how do we wipe this virus of billionaire lunatics off the planet?
These people don't think like people like you and me, right? I mean, if you look back at people like Edward Bernays, who really set up, the propaganda system in the US and also the advertising business and public relations in the US, the people he worked for and what he also said is, viewing the masses essentially as like beastly animals that are, they give in to their animal driven desires and they're not smart. And so they have to be driven and guided along by a technocratic elite. This type of ideology is very pervasive among the political and economic elite in the US and beyond. Right. So there's also a lot of interest, I think, in these people maintaining the extreme inequality in the US and beyond also. And they know at some point that there's going to be people-driven effort to, make it less ridiculously unequal, and they don't want that to happen. So how do you prevent people protesting or rising up about various systems that you wish to keep in place? You do that by control or expanding the surveillance, expanding, the different methods of control, restricting people's freedom of movement, things like that. And that's essentially what they're doing, and what they're piloting in this refugee camp is essentially, the next level of that to a significant degree. That's very disconcerting.
Yeah, it's interesting because I just did an article about some leaked documents that were put on The Intercept about how Department of Homeland Security actually has concerns with people wearing masks because they can't do facial recognition at these protests. And I'm wondering, all the crazy stuff that is happening, some of it seems very coordinated by the ruling elite, but some of it seems oh no, they didn't think, oh wait, we didn't think Portland was going to happen. We didn't think moms were going to unite with chefs and veterans in the streets. I don't know, I don't want to stray too far off topic, but this does feel like the ruling class is pushing all of these insane things, and some of them, I mean, I don't know. What's your sense of it? I mean, do you think this stuff is backfiring, or do you think we're all just being set up?
I mean, I think it's a combination of both, and I think it depends on the instance you're talking about. But I think to an extent, some things have backfired in the sense that I think a lot of the designs of the ruling class, I think in some ways they sort of have overplayed their hand and have tried to do too much too fast. And a lot of people have sort of gotten wise to a lot of things going on that may otherwise not have been exposed to certain types of information if things were more normal, right? But the question is, what do people do with that information? I mean, I think some of it is, you know, I honestly don't really know how much things are backfiring, though, regarding DHS, because actually there's a bunch of AI systems in China that have already figured out how to work around the mask issue. And I'm sure US and all their Silicon Valley pals that are also intelligence and defense contractors will figure out a way to do it anyway, you know? Well, so I don't really know how much, you know, that's technically backfired. I do think that, you know, we're headed for a very potentially much more turbulent times after the November election. And I think that the intelligence community and the defense communities are sort of setting up for that. And I think mainstream media over the past year has sort of seeded the narrative that there's going to be some sort of major event on election day or after that involves you know, the end of quote unquote democracy in the US. So, I mean, I think a lot of this surveillance stuff and these control systems and all of that they're trying to, you know, develop that for use at some point in the not too distant future in the US. Obviously, it will backfire more the more people are aware of this type of thing, right? But, you know, it also, you know, it basically depends on people's consent about things, right? So, like, if you're more informed about what's going on, you're less likely to consent what's going on, right?
Yeah, these are insane times. I really feel like the combination of whatever happens with the election, it's going to be nuts. Because if Trump loses, he's probably going to say no, I'm not leaving. If he wins, he will. There's not enough people to vote for him. I don't know. Then I think people would come forward and say, "Oh, he cheated," and then the people who just don't like him.
Yeah, I mean, they basically set it up to be that, and they've already said that, like, there's not going to be a winner announced on the day after. That there's going to be all these mail-in ballots. So obviously, if Trump doesn't win, he'll say there was fraud with mail-in ballots, pointing to various actual examples of election fraud that have happened in the U.S. over the past several decades. Whether or not that happens to favor him or, you know, hurt him, I mean, is you know, a different question. But I mean, there is a history of manipulation of voting totals in the U.S. I mean, that's just something that happens, right? And then, of course, you know, but I think it's more likely that they'll throw the hat, because I don't really, you know, I'm pretty cynical. I don't really think the elections, especially like the presidential elections, are organic. I think they're highly manipulated. And that the person who, you know, the ruling class wants to win is usually the person that wins. Though, I mean, both candidates are always, you know, favorites of at least one faction of the ruling class, right? So it could really go either way. But they've sort of already set up a narrative where it's going to be Trump refusing to leave the White House for whatever reason, and some sort of civil war narrative that's been set up that they're saying is going to happen. I really hope that's not the case, but I mean... they may try and engineer that, because a lot of the people that are saying this stuff are, you know, people in the intelligence communities or in the military, right? Who, you know, they have a vested interest in that type of chaos taking place, because the more chaotic things become, the more they can clamp down to restore order.
Yeah.
Right. So we already saw in March the military openly talking about something called continuity of government. And how some of those protocols were being activated. If you know what continuity of government is, it was basically a shadow government run in the 1980s during the Reagan administration by people like Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. It was activated after 9/11. Basically what it is, it's a form of martial law. Then you also have, beginning last year and throughout this year, a very disturbing company tied to Israeli and U.S. intelligence simulating since last November the cancellation of the U.S. elections and the declaration of martial law in the United States. So, I mean, who knows? But they're definitely setting things up for, you know, things to get a little dicey.
Yeah, and the mainstream media is really pushing this, like, civil war, you know, they keep pushing this, like, race tensions, white versus black, and it's like, no, it's a handful of, like, white nationalists and then everybody else. Like, they refuse to show, they won't say, like, at all these black...
But a lot of those white nationalist groups are totally infiltrated by the FBI and the feds.
Right.
And manipulated by them. and they serve a purpose for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, it's to keep everybody divided because they don't want
right.
working class white people to realize they're in a class warfare. They need them to feel like they're in some sort of race war. And that seems the narrative they keep pushing because all the protests I've been to is
well, whether it's race or like socialism versus capitalism or whatever, they just want people divided on any line they can aggravate. Right. And so that's what we're seeing. And what's really interesting, if you just do a Google News search for the word chaos or like democracy or end of democracy in election about the 2020 U.S. election, you will get a ton of results. I mean, in terms of chaos in elections, just in the past week, there's been like 6 articles in mainstream media talking about how chaotic and awful it's going to be.
Yeah, they're really ramping us up
like
for
months
that.
away.
Yeah, because it's not like some bumbling failure that we have these 2 horrible candidates. We really have the lesser of 2 rapists, and it's like it's the fact that it's not like, oh, how did this happen? This is by design because we have no real leaders. I mean, when Bernie Sanders and the AOC and the squad and everybody just buckled and endorsed Joe Biden, there's no real progressive leadership. And now all they do is sort of give speeches and tweets about how bad the Republicans are and refuse to call out the corruption of the Democratic Party. And so there's no leaders. And so it's just, I mean, literally the Democrats just voted down Medicare for all. They voted down reducing.
Yeah, didn't Bernie also vote for that? Like for the platform that doesn't have Medicare for all in it?
Yeah. I mean, he's just like, you clearly see either he's just weak, dumb, naive, or he was designed to just be a sheep herder to rally everybody into this thing and just nosedive the left into just sort of this scattered oblivion.
Well, it also prevents a real conversation about the state of politics in the U.S. and how essentially both parties are the same shit, right? I mean, if you look at Biden's campaign, the person who's going to be leading his transition team, his top advisor, it's former deputy CIA director under the Obama administration, Avril Haines, who used to be a consultant for Palantir. Palantir, of course, is like Peter Thiel's company. Peter Thiel led Trump's transition team, or tech side of it. He was like a major guy in the Trump transition team, choosing who would be in Trump's cabinet in key positions. Right. So, that's essentially who's going to be choosing who's in the Biden administration.
Is the same people in both parties. I mean, it's like, it's nuts. It's like going back to the beginning of this conversation about your article about this NGO. It's all these Republicans and Democrats who have just profited off of war and Wall Street. And, they got to keep us divided like this. This Coke versus Pepsi is some great battle, and they're so different from one another. And it's just professional wrestling, and it's insane. And then of course
it's like less entertaining than professional wrestling at this point. It's like more... the hearing with like Barr and like Ralph Nadler or whatever. I mean, they're like all just like whiny toddler adults. It's like unwatchable.
And it's exactly.
You almost think you can make a drinking game to it, and then you're like, no, this is just depressing and sad, and then you turn it off.
Yeah, a drinking game would just lead you to alcoholism. Is all that drinking game to watching those people? So like, you might as well just circumvent and go to an AA meeting. But that's what it feels like is happening in America. It's like watching an addict who you keep saying, you got to get sober. And they're like, no, I'm good. And like, you have to just step out of the way and watch them hit rock bottom and hope that they don't OD and die, because it's just like America is this, it feels like, I mean, I see little glimpses of positive things happening and people in Portland and everything, but like you said, we're going up against the private intelligence they've got people in the Proud Boys, like you said, in white nationalist group. And I'm sure they're trying to get, if they don't already have people in whatever Black Lives Matter or protesting.
Oh, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they've tried to do both sides and play both sides off of each other. I mean, that's the whole point of the divide and conquer thing, right?
Yeah.
Is that, you infiltrate both sides and you play them off against each other.
Yeah, so
they do this with protest movements or like, local, like smaller groups like this, right? But they also do it with nation states and make wars happen and create proxy wars and all this stuff. I mean, they're masters at this stuff.
Yeah. and they want everyone, because the reality is, if everybody got together and went, oh, we're actually in a class war and we need to go after the 1%, then it's over. Then like the people would just storm the castle and everything like that. But instead they get these white nationalist groups to go storm a Capitol building so they can go get a haircut or whatever. And of course the police, who have many, Klan members in the police force, don't do anything. They don't shoot flash bombs at them. They don't shoot them with rubber bullets when they seize a Capitol building in Michigan. It's so preposterous. But getting back to the private intelligence of your article, one of the things you mentioned in your article is there's an organization called USAID, which you said is propped up or
a CIA cutout.
And what is that? Explain that to our audience, what a CIA cutout means.
No, it's just basically, so there's two organizations in the U.S. that are like aid agencies to an extent that basically do what the CIA used to do, and they were created to spin off those operations of the CIA and conduct them under the guise of either promoting democracy in the case of the NED or National Endowment for Democracy, or through the provision of aid abroad like USAID. Right. USAID has been caught attempting to do coup attempts, overthrow governments on numerous occasions. They've been tied to a lot of other really shady things that have gone on, including like, there's going to be an article up on my site in a couple days about USAID and, creepy bioweapons, big pharma stuff. So, I'll just leave that part there. But they definitely have their hand in a lot of pies. And of course, they use it under the guise of aiding people. But a lot of it also, their aid involves basically getting, in terms of like agriculture, for example, getting people enslaved to Monsanto in foreign countries. Well, of course, Monsanto's now Bayer, right? But, things like that, basically foisting, U.S. corporate whatever on vulnerable war-torn populations. And then, when it is convenient for them, trying to stage coups and things like that, which they tried to do in Cuba. Numerous countries have actually kicked out USAID. I think Evo Morales in Bolivia kicked them out when he was still in power. I think Russia also expelled them, saying that they were trying to organize some sort of coup attempts in those countries, right? So, that's essentially what the NED and USAID do, right?
Wow. Well, Whitney, I know you, go ahead.
Well, really quick, they're actually really open about it. So like the first director of the National Endowment for Democracy openly said, and he's quoted in the Washington Post saying this in the early 90s, we do what the CIA used to do 25 years ago, right?
Wow.
So, I mean, like they're really in your face about it, but because like no one in mainstream media really challenges these organizations or their track record, at least not with enough frequency to produce like an impetus for change, nothing happens. I mean, but they even even Foreign Affairs reported on USAID's involvement or attempted involvements in coups and called them an intelligence agency, essentially. But they only wrote about them once, and like it didn't get a lot of buzz, and it wasn't on the TV news, so like no one cared, right?
Man. Well, the more you learn about these foundations, I mean, they just all it's like the Clinton Foundation, when those 20 countries that donated to it all got defense contracts when she became Secretary of State. I mean, it's just like they all just seem like scams. And from Epstein to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I mean, you were the one who told us that
Well, yeah. Well, like since Bill Gates set up his foundation, his net worth has grown by a lot. Like billions of dollars. He's like gotten way richer, and he set that up after the U.S. government forced him to break up Microsoft as a monopoly after those antitrust hearings or whatever.
Right.
And so he's been using his quote unquote philanthropy to do that. And if you look at like his vaccine philanthropy, for example, you look at something he backed like the Gavi Vaccine Alliance, which was part of ID 2020. If you go to the Gavi Vaccines Alliance page, it doesn't say we want to improve global health. It says we want to improve the health of vaccine markets. Right? God. And of course his foundation, or the foundation's trust that manages the foundation's investments, are invested in pharmaceutical companies. They're also invested in a private prison company. I guess he knows what stocks are going to be going up soon, right? But he can frame himself as a philanthropist, and people on CNN just sing his praises, right? But I mean, if you look at the oligarch behind CNN, Ted Turner, he created and like puts a bunch of money in the UN through the UN Foundation, and Bill Gates has all these really close ties to the World Health Organization. That's part of the UN. So they just got each other's backs, I guess, you know.
That's what they do. That's what these billionaires do. They just get each other's backs. You know, every once in a while they fight with each other, but like...
But it's fighting over, like, you know, it's like two predators fighting over the meat, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They're just like fighting over money and power and control, but they're like on the same team at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, yeah, because it's really just who gets to extract more from the 99% and punish them and kill them and treat them like animals or whatever, because they don't care.
I mean, that's how they view these refugees, right? I mean, they're clearly not looking at them as people.
No, not at all. They're just line items in a budget that they're just test subjects. They don't care. They're just like the most insanely soulless monsters. I mean, I don't know how else to. And we're sold that Bill Gates is this cuddly little nerd who does these little quirky interviews and
with his pastel sweaters and you know.
And then Mark Zuckerberg is just a goofy little guy wearing the hoodie. You know, and even though he's working hand in glove with the intelligence community or whatever, it's just like, I'm so tired of it. Like Elon Musk he's this tech genius. That's totally okay getting a coup over in Bolivia so he can get more minerals for his electric cars. Like, screw these guys. They're the worst people. Like, they're just the worst. It's just, Whitney, I appreciate you taking the time out, and you're just doing fantastic work. We love having you on the show.
Thanks.
Where can people find your work and this upcoming article?
Well, a lot of my work right now is being published on a site I set up called Unlimited Hangout, which was the name of my podcast that I'm really behind on, but I will be getting back to it soon. I'm like writing a book and trying to keep putting articles out because that's like my main thing, right? So, I'm working on it. Beyond that, you can follow me on Twitter _Whitney Webb. You can support me on Patreon. And then you can get early access to my articles that go up on Unlimited Hangout. I'm also writing still for The Last American Vagabond, where a lot of my pieces this year have been published. So you can find some of my stuff there too. And I think that's about it.
Excellent. Well, everybody out there, please support her. Follow her on Twitter. Go support independent media, because we need people like Whitney out there doing the hard labor, man. Like you just like you're an amazing investigative journalist. I'm always just
thank you. So
impressed. I'm just some comedian that got thrust into this when they stole my house. So it's just sort of like, I'm just like, all right, man. I was setting up today. I mean, I love doing the show. I was like, I didn't think I was going to be some journalist guy doing a live stream in his apartment, but
hey, I mean, me neither, but here I am, it's just, when you know what's going on, you want to inform other people, because it's really the only way we can change anything is if people are more informed.
Yeah.
It's like I said earlier, a lot of this comes down to consent. I mean, people that don't know what's going on will consent to all this stuff.
Right.
And think it, because they know how to manipulate people that don't know what's going on. Right. And this is like a whole like intelligence thing too. Like the former director of the CIA, William Casey, who was CIA director under Reagan, I forget his exact quote, but it's something like, "We'll know our disinformation campaign is complete when everything the American public believes is a lie."
Yeah. Yep.
So
and they've done it because we all know we're being lied to, but that's why there's people who think the earth is flat or whatever, like, because they can't trust it. They don't want to trust anything. So then it's easy to manipulate them to go chase some crazy conspiracy or whatever. When the reality, when you connect the dots the way you do, the reality is you just follow the money and the leaked documents and stuff.
Right. Well, there are real conspiracies, right? But what they're trying to do is lump in real conspiracies with crazy ones and be like, well, all of those guys are conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And they also said last year that conspiracy theorists are a domestic terror threat. That was the FBI last year.
Yep. And they came up with that term after the Kennedy assassination, I believe.
Yeah, the Warren Commission, which had the former CIA director that John F. Kennedy fired on it, Allen Dulles, who was also a closet Nazi.
Oh, weird. What a wacky coincidence. Gerald Ford was on that committee. Oh, what a weird coincidence.
Yeah, America's only unelected president, because he didn't win an election.
Yes. And they showed him as bumbling. He was bumbling while he was committing a coup and having a president murdered and covering it up. Anyway, we could talk about this forever.
Well, hey man, real American history is a trip. It's just crazy to think about all the shit they got away with, you know?
Yeah, anyone out there, I highly recommend you either read Howard Zinn's book or watch Oliver Stone's Untold History of the United States, which kind of uses Zinn's book that's on Netflix. So check those out and check out Whitney's work and support her, support indie media, cancel your cable and support shows like Whitney and mine.
Yeah, definitely cancel your cable. It's not helping you right now.
It's not helping at all. Well, Whitney, thank you so much for taking time. We'll have you on the show. Let us know again the next time you have another article out that's worth.
Absolutely.
Because you're doing great work. All right. Thanks, Whitney.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification button and the subscribe button, even if you've done it before, because they're unsubscribing, many of you, every day. Watch the ads all the way through. If you click skip ad, I don't get paid. Also, support us at patreon.com/Graham Elwood or rockfin.com/Graham Elwood. Rockfin.com is a blockchain cryptocurrency platform. All my videos are on Rockfin ad-free. Thanks for watching.